kind introduction. Boy, that video was incredible, wasn't it? I can't imagine anyone saying mean things about you like that. That really was something else. But, you know, one of the great things President Reagan did is he dealt with everything with a smile. Everything that came at him, he didn't take himself too seriously. He kept the focus on the American people. I'm reminded of an exchange. If you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to Google it. When he's president, he's doing a press conference, and Sam Donaldson, a reporter for ABC News, jumps up and says, Mr. President, you have blamed the problems in this country on everybody else. You blamed them on Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House. You blamed them on Democrats in Congress. Mr. President, you're President of the United States. Don't you bear any responsibility for the problems in this country? And Reagan leans forward with a twinkle in his eye, and he goes, well, Sam, yes. Yes, I do. I bear considerable responsibility because for many years, I was a Democrat. Even Sam Donaldson can't help but cracking up. It's a great, you can Google it, you can watch the video, and it ends with Donaldson doubled over laughing is the end of the clip. But it's important to speak the truth and have fun with it. How many of you have ever seen the TV show True Blood? All right, a few of you are admitting it. The rest of you are pretending you haven't. All right, so for True Blood, for anyone over 40 in the room, True Blood is a show on HBO about vampires. And last season, I rather unexpectedly had a cameo in True Blood. They have an episode where the vampires go to a Ted Cruz fundraiser. And they end up killing just about everybody. And so we decide, all right, we're going to have some fun with this. So we put up a post on Facebook. And we say, you know, if I were to sit down and try to make a list of every place I never thought my name would appear, HBO's vampire show True Blood would be really near the top of that list. And I went on to say, you know, I'm very, very sorry to have apparently lost the vampire vote. But I am amused and somewhat astonished that HBO seems to be suggesting that extreme leftists are blood-sucking fiends. So people laughed, they enjoyed it, but the very best comment came from someone commenting on Facebook, and he commented, he said, Ted, sorry to tell you, you never had the vampire vote. Because vampires are dead. And everyone knows the dead vote 100% Democrat. You gotta have fun and speak the truth. What I want to talk to you all about tonight is young people. This is a room of young people, either young in age or young in heart. And I gotta say, by the way, God bless the Young America's Foundation. As Andrew mentioned, when Heidi and I got married, Heidi's a native Californian, we got married in California. The day before our wedding, we took the whole wedding party for a picnic at the Reagan Ranch, which was so amazingly cool. For the entire wedding party, it was the coolest part of the weekend. I'd be in real trouble if I admitted that myself. But it was, I remember standing at the dining room table behind the chair President Reagan used to sit in. I wouldn't sit in that chair, but just standing there looking out the window at Lake Lucky and just absorbing the strength and clarity and leadership of that. it's interesting, if you look at reaching young people in modern times, the two Republicans who have done the best job connecting with young people have been Ronald Reagan and Ron Paul. Now, neither one of them was young, rugged, James Dean, or I don't know, what's the Twilight reference that would be James Dean? James Dean's about 40 years. What? Taylor Lautner, there you go. Okay, well that works. But what did they both have? Principle. A clear, optimistic vision that inspires young people. This is my world. This is what I believe. This is my future. You know, if you were to sit down and try to design an agenda to hammer the living daylights out of young people, it would be difficult to come up with a more effective agenda than the Obama economic agenda. Let me take 3 simple points. Number 1, jobs. For 6 years, young people, you're coming out of school at a time of stagnation. At a time where young people are wondering, am I going to find a job? I'm working for a degree. I'd like to start my career. I'd like to start getting skills. I don't know if there's going to be a job there. Or maybe I get a college degree, take $100,000 in school loans and end up serving coffee at a Starbucks. You know, economists are referring to this generation of young people as a lost generation. Because if you don't get a job at the first step, that's when you get the skills for your second job, your third job, your fourth job, and it stays with you for decades. I'll tell you, young people have a vested interest in getting back to the kind of vibrant economic growth that we saw under Ronald Reagan, the kind of booming growth that means young people come out of school and have 3, 4, 5 job offers from day one. It's your future that's at stake. Now, we all know that young people voted about 70-30 for Barack Obama, both in 2008 and 12. There are an awful lot of young people right now with faded posters of hope and change, sleeping in their parents' basements.
Ouch.
Let's take a second element. Take Obamacare. Please, take Obamacare. One of the simplest ways to understand Obamacare, it is a massive wealth transfer from young, healthy people to everybody else. And by the way, young people tend to be far less wealthier than older people. So it's literally taking from young people with less money and giving it to older people. And one of the best illustrations of it, if you haven't seen it, I'd advise you to go Google it. Jimmy Kimmel did a fake ad. And it was an older couple, one with a sweater around his vest, and they're talking to their grandson. And they said, you know, I've got rheumatoid arthritis. And Ed here, well, he's got a lot of health issues. He's got heart problems. And they're expensive. But we're not paying for them. You are. Why is that? Because you don't vote. And we do. Ta-ta, off to the golf course now. Bye-bye. You watch the commercial, it does a better job of communicating it than anything I could say. Because that quite literally is what happened. And then number 3, the national debt. A couple of years ago, I spoke at the Republican National Convention down in Tampa. And I talked about the national debt. I talked about our 2 little girls, Caroline and Catherine. Caroline, you want to wave to everyone? And Catherine is hidden under the table, or she's run off somewhere. So I'm not sure. Anyway, when I got back to the hotel room, Heidi and I both got in. About 1:30 in the morning, I pulled out my iPhone, began looking at Twitter. And the comedian, Paula Poundstone, turned out she had been watching the convention that night. I guess she didn't have anything better to do. And she sent a tweet. She said, Ted Cruz just said, when his daughter was born, the national debt was $10 trillion. Now it's $16 trillion. What the heck did she do? But Caroline today is 6. Almost 7, as she just reminded me. In her life, the national debt has gone now from 10 trillion to 18 trillion. It is larger than the size of our entire economy. Let me ask you something. Who the heck do you think is going to pay for that? It is almost... I think every young person, after you go in to vote, ought to walk out and punch your parents in the nose. I mean, it is as if your parents went out, took a credit card in your name, said, Savannah, we're going to Vegas. We're going to party it up. We're having a great time, and guess what? You get to pay the bill. If we don't stop what we're doing, every one of you will spend the rest of your lives not working to meet the challenges of the future, but just working to pay off the debts of your deadbeat parents and grandparents. The national debt is a very personal and real issue because every one of you is getting stuck with it. So how then do we change the direction of the country? I'll tell you, I am amazingly, powerfully optimistic. I am convinced we are on the verge of great change. But it's going to come quite simply from the men and women in this room. Young people have always been on the cusp of change. And I'll tell you, the young men and women in this room, there is no limit to what you can do. Let me tell you the story of our campaign for Senate in Texas. Are there any Texans here? All right. When we launched the campaign in January of 2011, I was at 2% in the polls. The margin of error was 3%. But those are our real poll numbers. I came home to Heidi, I was all thrilled. I said, we're at 2%. She said, well, sweetheart, technically, couldn't you be at -1? It's like, thank you, my love. And my opponent in that race was the sitting lieutenant governor, who controls the state legislature, which meant that virtually every statewide elected official in the state was against us. Virtually every lobbyist in the state was against us. Virtually every major corporation was against us. Virtually every major trade association was against us. And virtually every major donor in the state was against us. So how did we win? I'll tell you what we modeled the campaign after. It was Barack Obama's 2008 campaign against Hillary Clinton. That primary campaign. In 2008, Hillary Clinton was the most unstoppable, formidable primary candidate ever since Hillary 2016. And in the Democratic Party, all the money, all the infrastructure, all the bundlers, all the power in the party was with her. And Obama ran a grassroots guerrilla campaign, encircled her. She didn't know what hit her. I went and bought Obama campaign manager David Plouffe, his book, The Audacity to Win. Gave it to our senior team. Said, we are going to nakedly and shamelessly emulate this. We're going to do the exact same thing. So we began building a grassroots campaign from the ground, going to IHOPs and Denny's and VFW halls, and young people were the heart of it. Now, I'll tell you one story. We were down the Rio Grande Valley, South Texas, very, very Democratic part of the state, about 80% Hispanic, not terribly wealthy. We had a rally one Saturday night. It was at a church fellowship hall, and about 300 people came out. The county Republican chairman was there, and he welcomed everyone, and he said, you know, We're really glad Ted is here. Most Republicans, when they come down to the Rio Grande Valley, they go to the country club. They have a $1,000 a plate fundraiser and they leave. They said, Ted's different. This is not a fundraiser. Ted is here to listen to you and to have a conversation about your concerns. And I got up, I said, Javier, thank you very much for the warm welcome. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you everyone for coming. I gotta disagree with one thing Javier said. He said, this is not a fundraiser. Everything we do is a fundraiser. I said, listen, if you could write a big check, if you could max out, God love you, we need the money. I promise you, we will put it to good use, communicating and motivating conservative grassroots to come out. But even if you can't, I said, everyone here can give $5, or $10, or 25, or 50. And I said the power of doing so is, number one, if you give 5 or 10 or 25 bucks, you got skin in the game. Suddenly you're invested. Suddenly you're going to show up and vote. Suddenly you're going to talk to your friends. Suddenly it is your fight. We ended up outraising the other campaign. He raised $9 million. We raised $9.5. His $9 million came from 3,000 donors. Our $9.5 came from over 34,000 donors. Now, he ended up, he was also personally worth about $200 million. So he wrote a $25 million check on top of it. Had $35 million in relentless attack ads. How do we overcome it? And this goes to young people also. It goes to having fun, to using humor. One of the things we tried to do. At the beginning, we had no resources at all, but we had people who were passionate. So we decided, there were a whole bunch of candidate forums. And my opponent, a fellow named David Dewhurst, very nice man, but he kept skipping them. He would skip every forum all over the state. We go to forum after forum after forum, he wouldn't show up. So we were looking for, all right, how can we drive this message in a way that it'll be heard when we don't have any money? So we ended up putting together this campy video online. It's animated. It begins, Texas Mysteries. This Rod Serling voice. The Chupacabra. A strange coyote-like creature that ranchers in South Texas blame for killing their livestock. In East Texas, thousands claim to have seen Bigfoot or Sasquatch. And then there is that strange political creature, David Dewhurst. Since this campaign has started, he skipped 9 campaign forums, Tea Party forums, Republican women forums. The red word skipped spins and pops onto the page. Then a picture of a schoolhouse with a Gadsden flag appears and an animated tumbleweed blows by. Hard-working Texans can't seem to find David Dewhurst. Why is it for Texans that they're more likely to see a chupacabra than their own lieutenant governor? People cracked up. They had fun. They emailed it to their friends and it went viral. That's the power of young people spreading messages. That's the power of connecting with young people. And it's what every one of you can do. What I want to say to you is don't wait until you're 30, 40, 50 years old. You can be a voice for freedom right now. You can connect with your classmates, with your friends. You can connect with others. You can use humor. You can tell stories. You can connect with them in a way that moves them. And to be honest, the young people in this room can connect with young people much better than any politician ever has a prayer of doing. About 6 months ago, I was headed out to California. And The weekend before I arrived, these posters began appearing. They were pictures of my head with a shirtless torso, ripped, covered in tattoos, a giant eagle across my chest, 2 6-shooters on my abs, Winston Churchill on my right bicep, which was nothing short of massive, a cigarette dangling from my mouth, and above the legend, blacklisted and loving it. Now, we had nothing to do with these. There's a local street artist in LA who started putting these up. But again, we decided to have some fun with it. So we put it up on Facebook, a story about it, and we said, for whatever reason, these posters have begun appearing all over Hollywood. I have to say I noticed a glaring error. I don't smoke cigarettes. That's what y'all can do. You can connect, you can make people laugh, you can tell stories, you can motivate. You know, when it comes to constitutional liberties, when it comes to the Bill of Rights, it's your future that's at stake. I want to close with one final story. And it's a story of a young person who I admire very much. My dad. My dad was born in Cuba. And when he was in high school, when he was 14 and 15 years old, he joined the Cuban Revolution. Anyone here 14 or 15? Do we have folks? No one here 14 or 15? Yes, where? Oh, right there. All right. So I want you to imagine, my dad was in student council. What year in high school are you in? Sophomore. My dad was a sophomore in high school. He was on student council. He joined a revolution. He joined Fidel Castro fighting against Batista in Cuba. Imagine being 14 years old fighting in a revolution. He began throwing Molotov cocktails, spreading propaganda, fighting in a revolution. Now, he didn't know Castro was a communist, and none of the kids fighting knew that Castro was a communist. But then when my dad was 17, they threw him in prison. And they tortured him. They beat him halfway to death. And so when he was 18, he fled Cuba. Anyone here 18? All right, 18. Okay, I want you to envision. 18 years old. He went and lay on the back floorboard of his dad's car. His father drove him to Havana. He got on a ferry boat. Took a ferry to Key West. And then a Greyhound bus to Austin, Texas. He couldn't speak English. He didn't know anybody. He had $100 something into his underwear. And he got a job washing dishes, making 50 cents an hour. And he worked full-time. He paid his way through school full-time. And he went on to start a small business to work towards the American dream. Now, he was a kid. He was a kid when he was fighting in the revolution. He was a kid when he was alone in a country where he knew nobody. And yet that is what this country is built on. What I find most amazing about my father's story is how commonplace it is. Every single one of us in this room, we have a story just like that in our background. Every single one of us. We could walk up here one at a time, whether it's us, or our parents, or our great-great-great-grandparents. What ties America together is we are the children of those who risked everything for freedom. And that's what ties this group together. I am convinced we're going to get back to the principles that made America strong. To the founding principles, to the free market principles and constitutional liberties that built America into the strongest nation in the history of the world. And I'm also convinced that the young men and women in this room, that you have it in your capacity to lead that fight. Sociologist Margaret Mead said, What makes you think a small group of committed people can change the world? Answer: it's the only thing that ever has. How do we change the world? It's each of you. And I'll tell you, when they were saying those things about Ronald Reagan, there was a group of young people just like you who saw what he was saying and who were inspired and who rose up and said, I want to make sure that the same freedoms my parents had are there for me and my kids. It didn't come from Washington. As you saw in the video, Washington despised Reagan. It came from the American people. So I just want to encourage you to be a passionate voice for freedom, to use your voice now to persuade and move other young people. That's how we turn this country around, and I just want to say thank you for your love of freedom.